to wibble a little bit.
We witter and wibble.
Right.
With Michael, with Malcolm.
And with the jingle. Great. So we're carrying on in Samuel, aren't we? Samuel, was it 18 today?
Yes.
And the death of Absalom.
Poor Absalom.
And some betrayal as well. It's terrible, isn't it? Because David didn't want his son killed, but Joab just amazing. He went off and did his own thing.
I know. In David, there's an absolute consistency about this, isn't there? Not to kill the king's anointed, in this case, not to kill the son of the king because he is the son of the king, and yet I can imagine Joab, as a general, wanted to bring the whole conflict to an end.
Right.
And while Absalom was living,
that was not possible.
That was not going to be possible. Joab maybe was the politician, the realistic one, and David. And we'll see tomorrow how it evolves.
Because obviously David's not going to be very happy about that, is he?
I doubt it. I doubt
but
it.
It's very interesting because I'm always struck again by how sort of New Testament or how unlike the Old Testament David is, because he's not a sort of guy full of revenge. He sort of wants to be sort of forgive people. He won't kill, as you say, the kings and the anointings. Whereas in the Old Testament it was more, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Bloodlines, all that sort of thing, which is kind of where the general's coming from in a way. It's the old school. And I'm always kind of struck by how David does feel unlike. It's almost like something between the Old Testament and the New Testament, sort of like showing us something new that's going to come.
And I mean, in this case, it would have been very easy to capture Absalom and bring him alive to
Exactly,
David.
there he was.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because he's caught by his. It's very this whole thing about the forest consumes.
And the forest eats more. It's like Lord of the Rings, isn't it?
Exactly.
So the forest eats more, kills more people.
And it's sort of interesting. It's like the Lord just works this mysterious way and sort of helps David's army, because there's this wild forest full of wild animals that were eating soldiers, or cliffs or thickets and stuff they've got. And he's caught, and he has beautiful hair. There's another bit, isn't it, in Samuel? I did actually see this in my commentary today.
Yeah, it does.
He has
Say
luxury hair in 2 Samuel 14, and his sort of good looks now his undoing.
Exactly.
So rich these stories when you come to read them.
And then moving on to Acts, which is absolutely fascinating. Acts 10:34. This is Peter's speech to Peter's sermons to Cornelius. Cornelius has been told in a vision to send to Peter. Peter, I don't think we've read this bit, but has had a vision telling him he's to go to Cornelius' house, even though Cornelius is a Gentile.
Right.
And Peter now sort of saying to Cornelius, yes, I had hesitation, but God told me to come, even though you're a Gentile. And then he just teaches about Jesus. He talks about Jesus' life. That's quite unusual, because quite often they sort of jump over Jesus' life.
I mean, the bit he was sort of doing his...
how he went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed by the devil.
Right.
For God was with him. And then we're witnesses, and then they put him to death, but God raised him. His death, his resurrection, the fact that they are witnesses.
That was interesting, because it wasn't all the witnesses. Because it's interesting, he says it's almost like a select group of people who've been taught to be witnesses.
Yes. Yeah.
It's interesting, it's like God always goes for quality, not quantity.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I need a key bunch of people who I know will believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's their job to send it out to everyone else and pass it on, as opposed to get everyone in a sort of quantity message where you don't get perhaps so many believers. The other thing I thought was really interesting is that last passage. The circumcised believers who had come with Peter were astonished at the gift of those who had been poured out even to the Gentiles. They'd heard them speaking in tongues and extolling God. So again, it's this quite interesting thing about the early Christians being members of the Jewish church, but also Gentiles. And at that stage, they're still...
And this is a really significant moment.
Right.
particularly for Peter and the followers of Peter people. They suddenly realise this what they've got is for everybody.
Yeah, you're right. It's bigger than me.
It's bigger
Jew,
than me.
Gentile.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And then Peter says, and then it's what Jesus says, and Peter says, hey, so like guys, can anyone actually withhold the water for baptizing these people who have received the Holy Spirit just as we have? So assume that we means we Jewish people.
Jewish people, yes.
He's saying, come on, now we can baptize everyone. Who's against it?
Yes.
And no one.
What I like about this is that it says while Peter is still preaching, the Holy Spirit comes. You know, God doesn't have the decency to wait for the end of Peter's sermon. He just sort of acts.
Right. I mean, I like that. The Holy Spirit is very last minute. He's my silly guy. I like your point there. He just the Holy Spirit sort of picks up on a moment, right?
Yeah, and just comes on them. Yes.
Right, that's great. Wow. It's great. It's fascinating.
And that great line as well, all the prophets testify about him, and this is what Peter says, and probably he doesn't even believe it at this point, that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name. Peter is probably thinking everyone, well that means Jews, but actually no, God means everyone, anyone who hears and receives.
Right.
Receives forgiveness of sins.
Remind me, was it earlier on in Acts 1 at the beginning of all these Acts reads, was it Acts 2 or 3, where, was it Peter who did another great...
Peter does, yes.
Was he trying to defend himself?
No, on that occasion the Holy Spirit comes.
Right.
There are several sermons from Peter.
Right.
The Holy Spirit comes and Peter preaches and says this is...
Right.
Don't be amazed, this is what God promised. And then, yes, then there are other occasions when he's standing in front defending himself.
Exactly, that was what I was thinking, because then afterwards he's basically taken out and stoned. Is that right? No.
That's Stephen.
Stephen, sorry, I'm muddling up Stephen.
That's Stephen.
Right, who also does a sermon?
He also has Stephen has a very different take.
Right.
And sort of goes through Israel's history about how they always rejected God.
That was right. It's the history of Israel, right, and summing up the Old Testament, and then coming right. Okay, that started clear in my head. That was Stephen, and this is
Stephen. That was the
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's confusing. Right.
Lovely.
Great.
Have a lovely day and
a great week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hope to see you tomorrow.
Bye. For more installments of this exciting reading. I mean, incredible. Better than going to the movies or a Netflix series.